A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes.
Breaking right now, JD Vance, the US Vice President, has given what Alison Pearson of the Daily Telegraph has called the speech of the century at the Munich Security Conference. Now, of course, the timing of this speech couldn't be any more significant. Just yesterday, another revolting terror attack by an Islamist fundamentalist who should not be in Germany in the first place shook the very city that Vance has turned up in. Now, JD Vance has said here that Europe should be far less concerned about Russia and more concerned with the threat of freedom from within. This is clearly a reference to the attacks on freedom of speech, the attacks on religion. But what's great is that I have Claire Fox with me. Neither of us have seen this speech, which I am told is utterly extraordinary. So I've got a section of this now, which we are going to watch together. Let's go. Go JD Vance. I'm excited.
And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person, but no. This last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is
Wow, free speech, I fear, is dead. Claire Fox, shots just fired from the US Vice President.
So JD Vance the other day at an AI summit, which I thought, oh, this is going to be dull, also made an absolutely stonkingly brilliant speech centering on free speech. And the fact that he's made this speech today would indicate that he is an important, hugely important voice in free speech in Europe terms. My God, what can you imagine the humiliation of the UK for it to be known on the international stage that they actually prosecuted people for silent prayer? Now, let me make it clear. I'm an atheist. And what's more, I'm pro-choice. That means pro-abortion, and so on. So you'd think that I wouldn't be on his side on this. But actually, I argued against that law for buffer zones because I always knew that the state being allowed to make it illegal for people to stand around, leaflet, or have any voice at all outside an abortion clinic was a very dangerous precedent to set. And as we've seen, it has been used to criminalize silent prayer. And I think that we can be grateful, I mean, dare I say it, to JD Vance and the Trump administration, and I've got loads of criticisms of them, but I can be delighted that Elon Musk raise the issue of the rape gangs to such a point that actually the government were embarrassed to do something. And I really, really hope now that this eminently sensible point by JD Vance allows us to keep raising this issue of the attacks on free speech in this country. Because one thing I didn't refer to earlier, which was a hugely important, is that on this private WhatsApp row about the Labour MPs and so on saying vile things, that the police were involved and issued a non-crime hate incident. We have a situation in this country, maybe JD Vance will talk about it, in which you don't have to have committed a crime. Nobody even said you've committed a crime, but the police can come round, warn you for a thought crime, for a pre-crime, and write your name down on a police database. I mean, what an atrociously authoritarian situation that is. So brilliant. I'm cheering all the way so far. Now, I haven't heard what else he said, so he might have said some atrocious things I don't agree with, but that clip, brilliant.
Yes, that clip was great. He said that free speech was dead in the UK. He actually said it was in retreat. However, it is being viewed as very significant that he has called out the United Kingdom and this Labour government more than any European state. Yeah. He did really go for the issue of uncontrolled mass immigration, though, to Claire, saying no voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants. The reason you're watching this show is because you know that these days, and we've been discussing it lots at the moment, it's impossible to trust the mainstream media or the so-called fact checkers who claim to patrol social media. And that's for a very good reason, given the Brexit debate, COVID debacle, and demonization of Donald Trump. But I've got the solution for you. Today's sponsor, Ground News, created by a former NASA engineer to provide you with the only safe way to consume the headlines, is going to solve so many of these issues. Go to ground.news/outspoken to check it out for yourself, by the way. But I want to show you this incredible website and app in action. So let's take the recent story. We've discussed it lots of Outspoken of Elon Musk's fallout with Nigel Farage over Tommy Robinson, which the left-wing legacy media tried to whip up to destroy all three men, actually. And by looking at Ground News, you can see very clearly that it's collated the 230 sources on this story in one place. But what Ground News instantly shows is how the story is being covered by the media and broken down by whether those media organizations lean to the left or right, illustrated by its biased distribution service, which features on all stories. Then you can scroll down and actually see every article about the topic broken down by the political position or ownership of the publication. So in this case, it shows quite clearly that Fox News gave a fair analysis compared to Mediaite and The Independent, which did not, lambasting the men as morons with big egos without actually looking into why this split happened and how it can be resolved. What's more, Ground News gets to know you personally, providing you with the news stories you're interested in, while also analysing your own biases and coming up with potential blind spots you might not be hearing about because of your media consumption. And look, I know you love the news, that's why you're watching Outspoken, but you don't trust the legacy media. But what Ground News does is give you the tools to understand the truth about what is going on in the world. It is the only way I read the news now, allowing you to see through media bias and manipulative narratives with no more relying on the MSM to define what's really going on for you. So go to ground.news/outspoken to check it out. You can subscribe through my link today for 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I use for unlimited access. And I should say, by the way, Ground News is a really great organization. It is subscriber funded, and by supporting my sponsors like Ground News, you also support my work too. And for less than a Netflix subscription, you can get all the world's news in one place and think for yourself. It really has been a game changer for a news junkie like me. So let me just repeat the address. It is linked in the show notes below, or you can click on the QR code if you're watching on screen. But the address, ground.news/outspoken. But now, back to the show.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't disagree with him on that either. I mean, listen, I'm from a liberal left, relatively, liberal on immigration, but I have been myself shocked and horrified by the way that immigration has been allowed to go out of control, right? And the lies that were told. We were talking about, Matt Goodwin accusing Jackie Smith of lying. I mean, one of the greatest lies and one of the things that is most galling is that just after the citizens of this country democratically voted to stop freedom of movement, we get into a situation where we discover that the Conservative Party that was supposed to be delivering on that Brexit promise actually said, oh yeah, we won't have freedom of movement of Europeans, but we're going to allow legally millions of people to enter the country. And they did that behind the backs of the electorate, right? They didn't have that as a democratic discussion. So good on Vance as well. I mean, listen, I think that what we can say is that I've been really worried, so I'm glad Vance has done this, that the Trump vibe and the impact on Europe is something which we can see whether it has an impact, but we have to build our own fortunes, right? We can't be dependent on the Americans saving us on this one, although any help is appreciated. But at the Academy of Ideas, we're actually going to set up a European free speech network. We're working on that at the moment.
Love it.
Because my concern is that too many people in Europe now see Europe as the kind of home of illiberal wokeism and attacks. Everything is equality, diversity, and inclusion, and they want to pose themselves as distinct from the sort of mad Trumpist, far-right American free speech world. And I think what we need to do if we're free speechers in Europe is to actually build our own movement to show that actually Europe is not going to become the bastion of closing down speech. It's actually from the grassroots, not from the EU side, from grassroots ordinary citizens, we've got to lead the fight back.
And Claire, obviously, an election in Germany in just 9 days' time. Now, Elon Musk has said the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, is the only way to save Germany. Nigel Farage, I saw yesterday, says, no, I'm not associating myself with them, the far right. Now, I'm in the Musk camp on this, you might not be surprised to learn. Where do you stand on the rise of the AfD?
So I'm going to sit in the middle, which is always very uncomfortable for me because I'm not the type. But listen, the AfD's got some particularly unpleasant, well-known unpleasant racists in it. There's no getting away from that. And I mean racist. I don't use that term, by the way, glibly, because I know that it's been used to describe anyone who's concerned about mass migration or, in fact, who voted Brexit or anything else, right? But there are people, and we've seen it in the UK, there is a rise of ethno-nationalism that actually genuinely objects to people because they're of the color of their skin, has this sort of notion of an England for the white English and so on and so forth. I despise that kind of prejudice and bigotry. And I do think that's what it is, and it should be called out as such. However, there are going to be hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who vote for the AfD for the same reason that they will vote for any populist party anywhere, right? Because they represent the alternative. That's what makes it confusing. So I know from colleagues and friends of mine in Germany that many very smart, bright, non-bigoted German young people are going to vote for that party. And just describing them as Nazis and putting up posters saying never again and reminders of the 1930s, what the German left are doing is cheap politics and doesn't work. So I can understand what Nigel's in a difficult position because he's under pressure from some of these kind of more unpleasant ethno-nationalists in the UK to kind of, actually genuinely say, kick all the Muslims out, regardless of anything, right? Which is disgusting, in my opinion, right? When many British Muslims are as abhorred by Islamism as anyone else, etc., etc., etc. I don't need to go on. He also doesn't want to be associated. I mean, we were in the European Parliament. We met some of them characters, right? And some of the people associated with European populism leave a lot to be desired. But he shouldn't be too hard line about it. I think Musk went too far because he doesn't always understand European politics. But I think that we have to be much more pragmatic in a way and recognize that this populist revolt that's happening all over the world, in all of the European countries, is ordinary people saying we will not be looked down on, we will not be treated as fools, we will not be taken as saps who just go along with the establishment parties because we're told that if we don't, we're going to get this horrible label of being far right or Nazi or what have you. I mean, I get called that all the time by people who are prepared to turn their cheek and look the other way when we've got the rise of visceral anti-Semitism in this country, and yet they have the nerve to start throwing that as an accusation if you raise something like the murder of Sir David Amess by an Islamist. So I think that we've got to be more pragmatic and say we understand what's happening in Germany. And to be honest, it's the same trend as the rise of reform in the polls. So Nigel has to recognise that it's part of the same movement. People are saying we're tearing up the old establishment parties because they have betrayed us. They do not deserve our vote. And absolutely right, they are too.
Totally, and it's why I believe Marine Le Pen will become president of France as well. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.